Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and, honestly, highly provocative thought experiment presented in our source material. We're looking at a deep, historical theory regarding economics, labor, and the fundamental shift in the modern family structure. Basically, we're going to explore whether the massive societal changes we just take for granted today were organic or if they were carefully engineered.
Okay, let's dive into this. Was the modern two-income household built for your freedom or for corporate profit? The source presents this really incredible historical puzzle, how the massive shift in family dynamics over the last century might not have been just some grassroots cultural evolution, but an alleged, highly calculated economic strategy solved by 20th century corporate elites. It completely flips the script on how we view the typical modern family.
Section 1. The elite labor problem. Basically, running out of workers.
To really wrap our heads around this theory, the source asks us to do a bit of historical roleplay. Imagine you're a powerful industrialist back in the mid-1900s, someone like John D. Rockefeller, right? Your corporate empire is expanding rapidly. Your influence literally spans the globe, but you hit a massive roadblock. You've run out of cheap labor. You need millions of new workers to run the factories, handle the sales, and manage all those growing administrative tasks. So where do you find them? Well, the answer was sitting right at home. At the time, nearly 50% of the American population, women, represented a massive, totally untapped labor market. You might be wondering, why weren't they already in the factories? Because traditionally, a single male income was entirely sufficient to sustain a household. This allowed mothers to focus their energy on raising children and managing the home completely without the pressure of earning a second corporate paycheck.
So, as a corporate titan needing bodies in factories and offices, you face a massive psychological hurdle. How do you convince half the population to abandon their natural inclination toward family life, clock in at a factory, and report to a corporate boss? The source argues that these elites realized they needed a powerful new narrative. They had to launch a massive PR campaign to convince women that working for a corporation was somehow far better and more empowering than raising a family.
Moving on to Section 2, Engineering the Workforce Shift, a calculated movement.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the source draws a strict, crucial distinction between two phases of the feminist movement. Early feminism was about necessary fundamental rights, voting, owning property, and equal opportunity in the workplace. The source fully supports this early stage. But then, the argument goes, elites co-opted the movement, engineering what became radical feminism. This new version wasn't just about equality anymore. The source argues it was actively anti-family, obsessively career-driven, and hyper-focused on creating a deep division between men and women. To make this radical shift actually work, very specific psychological arguments were relentlessly pushed into the mainstream. Motherhood and homemaking were suddenly reframed. They were no longer seen as vital, sacred societal roles, but rather as tools of patriarchal oppression. True empowerment was aggressively rebranded as clocking in for a corporate 9-to-5 job. And perhaps most destructively, men were increasingly portrayed as the enemy holding women back, rather than equal partners in building a family and a life together.
Section 3. The economic domino effect. The corporate math.
So the crucial point is that the corporate math behind this was cold, calculated, and highly effective. Step 1. You successfully double the labor force by bringing millions of women into the corporate world. Step 2. Because the supply of available workers is suddenly so high, corporations can stagnate or even lower overall wages. Everyone is now competing against each other for the same jobs. And Step 3. The government wins massively too, because they now collect income tax from 2 people in every household instead of just 1.
And this created a massive, cascading timeline of societal impacts. Back in the early 1900s, single-income families thrived. By the 60s and 70s, as women were culturally pushed into the workforce, the entire dynamic shifted. The source argues this led directly to our present reality. With both parents working, 5-year-olds are handed over to the public school system earlier than ever to be molded by the state. Families completely strapped for time are forced to rely heavily on fast food and highly processed meals. And the relentless push for dual corporate careers has resulted in an absolute explosion of skyrocketing college debt. Let's look at Section 4, Funding Radical Feminism, the Elite Agenda.
But you have to ask, how do you change an entire culture so quickly and so thoroughly? Well, the source claims it was bankrolled from the top down by billionaire industrialist families, powerful names like the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, and the Fords. To really underline this claim, the text highlights a very striking quote from filmmaker Aaron Russo, recalling a private conversation he had with Nicholas Rockefeller. Russo claims Rockefeller told him flat out, his family created the women's liberation movement.
The core argument here is that radical feminism wasn't merely a grassroots organic awakening of the people. It was a highly funded top-down corporate creation designed specifically to serve elite interests.
The source details the exact vehicles these billionaires allegedly used to inject this ideology into the fabric of society. They poured millions into universities to establish women's studies and gender studies departments, basically providing an academic justification for dismantling the traditional family structure. They heavily influenced mass media, pushing magazines like Cosmo to promote a hyper-independent, anti-marriage lifestyle. And they extensively bankrolled initiatives like Planned Parenthood, spearheaded by figures like Margaret Sanger, to ensure family planning closely aligned with their corporate labor needs.
But there was another, equally cynical strategic benefit to all of this. Back in the 1960s, the American public was incredibly united in their anger against wars, societal injustice, and the wealthy elite. The source proposes a brilliant divide-and-conquer theory. Radical feminism served as the perfect distraction. By igniting a fierce gender war and turning men and women against each other, the elites effectively redirected the public's collective anger away from the billionaires and pointed it squarely at the opposite sex. It's like a giant sleight of hand. Section 5. The Modern Happiness Paradox. Are we actually better off?
And this brilliantly illustrates a really dark paradox that emerges in the source's data. Despite massive corporate advances and societal shifts, average female life satisfaction has actually declined over the last 50 years. Furthermore, back in 1970, only 1 in 10 women reached menopause without having children. Today, that number has doubled to 1 in 5. The source attributes a whole host of specific negative societal outcomes directly to these engineered changes. It notes a staggering 60% drop in marriage rates since 1970. The culture has violently shifted toward casual relationships, which the source directly links to rising rates of depression and low self-esteem. There is an observation of widespread gender confusion, societally pushing women to be hypermasculine and competitive, while men become more passive and feminine. And finally, there is a massive physical and psychological reliance on hormonal birth control just to maintain this corporate lifestyle.
Looking at the data on happiness, a very clear trend completely contradicts the radical narrative we are constantly sold. Despite a relentless, decades-long cultural push glorifying total independence and the single life, married couples consistently report significantly higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction compared to unmarried or single individuals. The traditional partnership, it seems, still yields the highest emotional returns. No contest.
Finally, Section 6, Reclaiming True Choice. True freedom.
Let's move to and see how this builds toward the climax of the argument. The source makes a really vital clarification here. The solution is absolutely not about stripping away anyone's rights. Women who truly want to work or build businesses should have every right to do so. The goal is reclaiming true choice by pulling back the curtain and understanding the hidden narrative that has been influencing those choices all along. The core issue identified here is that we're living within an artificial system that intentionally turned natural partners, men and women, into corporate competitors. This constant friction, this unending competition between the sexes, is viewed as a systemic trap. It's a trap that is slowly causing societal collapse rather than fostering the true partnership, mutual support, and family cohesion we were inherently designed for.
This brings us to the ultimate takeaway from the source, perfectly summarized in this quote. The problem is not choice, the problem is the narrative. Society has been tricked. We have been systematically programmed to label clocking into a corporate job and generating profit for someone else as the ultimate form of success. Meanwhile, we simultaneously dismiss the immensely vital, foundational, and powerful role of raising a family and motherhood as a failure or a waste of potential.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to ponder today. Are your life choices truly your own? Or are they shaped by a corporate narrative designed decades ago by elites who just wanted a larger, cheaper, and more divided workforce? It's a really heavy thought, but one fundamentally worth reflecting on as we each define what true freedom, happiness, and success actually mean in our own lives. Thank you so much for